Hi, and welcome to the second episode of the Fractured Self Devlog. And in this one, we're going to focus on pre-production. So basically, this project is all about building a game from concept to launching on the Steam store. So the idea is that it can be built as a template for a teachable course. And so I'm working around my teaching jobs and exam board jobs. So here I've got the scope. I'm going to try and get this done in 96 hours, 24 weeks, roughly 3 to 4 hours a week, hopefully more. Building 4 environments, a very simple single core mechanic, about 60 minutes runtime player experience. So that's the basic idea of the project and the scope. And if we move on, and try to have some guardrails in here as well. So the idea is to have a solid plan and not to go outside of these guardrails. You can see here we've got the core boundaries, the mechanics we're not going to add, the narrative and content we're not going to add, and a bit further on, some of the technical rabbit holes we're going to try and avoid. Okay, the whole idea being to try and keep this within the time frame that we've planned for. Another part of the pre-production is the Gantt chart. You can see I've got my Fractured Self 24-week Gantt chart starting from the 16th of March. And I've tried to break it down into production and planning, the design documentation, sourcing and creating the art and the assets, doing all the scripting, all the testing and quality assurance, building the audio, a bit of accessibility, working on the build and a bit of marketing. And you can see I've stretched it over these dates, and I try to put in all the dates here so I can stick to all of this. It's a bit of accountability for myself. So I go, okay, I need to get this done by this date and this done by the following date. But you have to bear in mind that things are going to happen. I've had a period of illness, things are going to get thrown out. So you're always going to have to be flexible with this Gantt chart. So for example, let me close this here. And you can see I've updated this to a version 3. And it's still the same kind of structure, but you can see the actual events have changed. Things like my production and planning, I started in March, that's still the same. But other things have been bumped on because of my schedule being slightly thrown out. So always bear in mind that you need to be very flexible with your Gantt chart because things will happen and there's literally nothing you can do about that. Okay. Another area of project management is my actual Trello board. So I'm using this to try and break down all of the different tasks I need to do to complete this game. So first of all, I've tried to break down all the tasks into a color code kind of system. So here on this column, I've got my label color code, ready for anything urgent. I've got my pre-production and planning, and my design documentation, my art and assets, scripting, testing and quality assurance, audio, accessibility, the builds that will finally end up on the Steam store, all the marketing concepts and ideas, and here a board for any nice ideas, anything that comes up that maybe could be implemented. So what I've done, you can see here I've got a backlog of tasks. So I can just scroll through these and you see I've got my cutscenes to work on here and scroll down. So I've tried to break it down into as many basic tasks as possible without drilling down too much. So for example here, I've building the modular kit for the different environments. So 1 to 4, the prop list for the hero main character, things like that. You see, and scrolling on, maybe just get to some of the scripting. Set up the Unity project. I'll be using starter assets as a basis for my character, first person and third person. So I need to modify that. So all these different tasks, I try to break them down as small as possible without being too ridiculous. So I like to say, okay, I've done this and I can move on. You can see there's quite a lot of tasks here. But I'm thinking, rather than having one massive project, it could probably be a bit overwhelming. I can break it down into lots of mini projects. It's like, oh, one task done, the next task done. I can sign those off. You can see I can just scroll through here. And the idea behind this is, if for example, I've done my intro cutscene task. Okay, I can say, all right, I want to work on this. I can move it here to this column, my to-do column, things which I'm working on. I'll drop that back here, so I'm obviously not working on that now. But in my to-do column, I've got my switching rules, because the main game mechanic is perspective switching. So I need to work out the specific rules for that, whether they're forced or whether they're player-driven. The transition behavior, the blend time in between each perspective change. So all these things here, all these tasks are broken down, things which I'm currently working on. And when I've done something, you can see here, I can move it. If I'm working, I can move it to, in progress, I'm working on this. Okay, I've got my story method, space objects, audio lighting, I can work on that. It's still in the to do, because I probably won't start on these till tomorrow, to be honest. And when I've done something, what I can do, I can literally put it into the done column. So here you can see I've got a few things. I've done my core mechanic. I've written down in the specification for the anchor based switching, the core game overview. I've done my capture card. I've set up a few project structures in Unity already. It's still like a basic empty project, but there's all the folders there, all ready to roll. Okay, again, one of the first things I did up here was to define the project vision, design pillars, my scope guardrails. So it's also quite satisfying, I think, as well, to say, okay, I've done a task, and you can see your backlog going down and your done going up. So it's quite an incentive to move on to say, okay, I've achieved this thing now, I can move on, I can achieve something else. So obviously, over kind of the 24, maybe 30 weeks, it might end up now. The backlog will be empty, and maybe a couple of things in a nice capture card. The testing things will be pretty full, the Q&A, but the done will be complete. So this is my way of managing the project, and it's only a single Trello board, but I think if you pay a bit more, you can have a collaborative board and have loads. If you work in a team, you can have loads of people working on different areas of the game. So I'm thinking about that. Hence, things are color coded so everyone knows what is what here. Okay, so this is my actual project management. Okay, this is the last bit of pre-production I want to look at. So I'm in the game design documentation. So this is the concept which I've kind of covered in the first devlog. So you can just have a little look at that. Basically what the game is all about. And you play this operative, and you work your way through this sci-fi military base. And you run into anomalies, and the key mechanic is the perspective shifting. So that is basically the concept which was covered in the first devlog. So to scroll down. So it's a bit more about the concept, and then a little bit about the play phrase in summary. So what the player is going to do, explore an abandoned sci-fi station. The operative gradually loses their mental footing, must rebuild a sense of self, and getting on to what the core mechanic is. So it's basically built around perspective switching as a state of meaning between first and third person, blended with a controlled transition. Okay, so it's only anchor based, again keeping with the very strict kind of guardrails on the actual development process. And moving on a little bit to the player experience. So talking about some of the color psychology as you move through different environments. So these are some of my ideas for how the color will work, which I want to implement in materials and textures once I start building in Unity. I'm going to use a Cinema Machine virtual camera kind of rig, but the idea is it's not just a camera rig, it's trying to convey the different emotions of the operative as they go through the different environments. So I'm going to build a perspective manager to manage those camera shifts. So you can see here, first person mode for claustrophobia, fixation, internal stress, third person more for vulnerability, surveillance and powerlessness. So having two different kind of emotional modes with the different camera kind of visions. So use different layer masks and post processing to support all of that. Again, I've got a little bit here about the different kind of camera angles that I want to use in third person mode. Yes, some more of the camera kind of angles. Okay, and now moving on to a bit about the theme. You know, the game explores the theme of being split between different versions of the self. That's the idea behind the game. That's what I'm going to try and convey in the build. And a bit more about the setting, about the different micro zones that the player will move through. And some of the art direction here. And some of the design pillars. And this here is the core gameplay loop. So basically the player's going to explore, they're going to observe, they're going to hit an anchor point and they're going to shift from one different camera mode to another. And this will reveal new environments and new areas, new materials and textures. And then like they need to recontextualize their identity, and from there they progress. And then back again, we explore, observe, anchor, shift, reveal, recontextualize and progress. So that is the core gameplay loop. So the idea, you know, the player goal, move through liminal spaces and cover meaning by noticing how the environment contradicts itself across perspectives, and there'll be kind of bits of hidden meaning and hotspots to find throughout the game. And some of the things that are going to change when the player shifts perspective. And I've got a little bit here about the player controller. Just basically going to be based on starter assets, and the character I'm using is a mixer mode character, so it's a pre-built character that I'll be adding some animations to for the cutscene. So no sprinting, slow movement speed, a subtle camera weight. And here is the narrative breakdown. What I've tried to do here is build the narrative so when I come to build a game, I don't have to think too much about what kind of happens in the game. I've kind of decided already, so I can use my mental energy on just technical implementation. Because to be honest, you know, all of us have a limited energy span. You can only do so much. If I do all the creative stuff here, then all I need to do is a technical implementation, put that technical creative energy into play. So here we've got our intro cutscene. So this is what happens through the intro cutscene. Then moving on to some of the audio direction, the gameplay function, you know, the success state, fail state. This is the cinematic sequence. So that's not gonna be implemented here, and the technical implementation, you know, for the cutscene. And then we move on to the first camera switching zone. And again, we have the direction for the environment, audio, gameplay function, success state, fail state, the specific technical implementation for like code and logic that needs to be done in Unity. Then we move on to another first person intent zone. Again, you see the narrative environment direction, audio, gameplay function, success, fail state, technical implementation. And this kind of moves on from, you have a switching zone. So in this zone, you switch, say, from first person to third person, and this breaks down all the gameplay and all the technical activity within that zone. And then we're moving on to our third person, mild reality warping zone 2. So we're in the second environment, and again, all of the technical and creative direction to build this. Then we move into a camera switching zone, third person to first person. Then from that switching zone into this into zone 3, the first person intent zone. Another camera switching zone here. And again, you can see all of the art direction, technical direction, creative direction. And then finally, our final reset zone. So this is where the player gets to the final zone. And this is the narrative and environment direction. Again, the audio, gameplay, success, fail state, and all the technical implementation. Okay, so that basically is, there's obviously loads more in the game design document, but that is the core of what I'll be working from. So this, I'll go back to the top here. This, where are we? This narrative flow breakdown. This is going to be close at hand because when I'm building in Unity, these are the steps I'm going to follow. So, okay, I need to do this, for the narrative and environment. This is the audio I need to build in. This is a gameplay function I need to build in. So this is going to be my go-to documentation for working in Unity.